Let's talk about performance feedback. I know for a lot of us, just hearing those words can be a little stressful, but what if we could flip that script? Today, we're diving into a framework that's all about turning feedback from something we dread into a powerful tool for real, actual growth. Come on, we've all been there, right? You walk out of a review with feedback that's so vague, you just think, okay, so what am I supposed to do with that? This whole framework we're looking at today is designed to put an end to that confusion, for good. We're going to break this down into 5 key parts. First, we'll get into the core philosophy, the why behind it all. Then we'll talk about making real actionable plans. After that, we'll sort out who does what, cover the super important legal and ethical rules, and wrap up with how this all becomes a cycle of nonstop improvement. Okay, and this right here, this is the whole game. You need to be more proactive. What does that even mean? It's just a fog of words. But I want you to lead the planning for the next team project. Now that is a clear mission. It completely swaps out confusion for direction. And that's the big shift we're talking about. So before we jump into the how-to, we really need to get our heads around the philosophy. This isn't about ticking a box on some HR form. It's about building a culture where direct, constructive feedback is what actually fuels people's growth. The actual delivery of the feedback follows a really clear path. You start by setting the stage, making sure it's a safe, private space. You lead with some positives to build a foundation of trust. Then you get specific with factual examples. And this is key. You focus on what someone did, not who they are. It has to be a two-way street, a real dialogue. And it all wraps up by creating a plan for the future. This quote really gets to the core of it all. The goal is to be helpful, not just to be nice. Sugarcoating the truth or avoiding a tough conversation doesn't help anyone grow. In fact, it just breaks down trust over time. Honest feedback, when it's delivered with respect, is what really builds people up. Okay, so you've had a really great, constructive conversation. Now what? Well, this next part is maybe the most critical piece, turning all that talk into a concrete plan of action. And the blueprint for any great action plan is the SMART Goals framework. It's a simple, but honestly an incredibly powerful tool for making sure your objectives are crystal clear. Every goal has to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant to the actual feedback, and, of course, time-bound. And here's a perfect example of what that looks like. It's specific, the Acme project. It's measurable, that 15% reduction. It seems achievable in that time frame. It's absolutely relevant to business improvement, and it's time-bound, November 2024. See? There's just no room for misunderstanding there. That is the power of a SMART goal. But look, a plan is totally useless if you just stick it in a drawer and forget about it, right? You've got to follow up. Progress gets tracked with clear metrics or KPIs. If someone's struggling, counseling isn't about punishment. It's about getting to the root of the problem together. And the plan itself isn't set in stone. You have regular check-ins to make adjustments as you go. All right, let's zoom out for a second. Because really effective feedback isn't a one-person show. It takes a whole ecosystem of people, all working together, with everyone understanding their part to play. Now, of course, the manager has a big slice of the pie here, but look how big the employee's role is. They are an active driver of their own development, not just a passenger. And then you have HR and the department heads providing that essential support and structure for the whole thing. So the manager is really wearing a few different hats. They're a trainer, a facilitator, and a partner in building that action plan. They really drive the process, from that first private meeting all the way to the consistent follow-ups and making sure everything gets documented properly with HR. So where do HR and department leaders fit in? Well, you can think of them as the guardians of the whole system. Their job is to make sure the process is being used consistently and fairly across the board, providing that high-level backup that lets it all work. Now, we need to talk about something that is absolutely non-negotiable, the legal and ethical guardrails. This isn't just about best practices. It's about making sure the process is fundamentally fair, respectful, and safe for everybody involved. And you can really see the split here. On one side, you have the legal must-dos, things like non-discrimination and proper documentation. On the other, you have the ethical principles that build trust, like transparency, confidentiality, and basic human respect. You have to have both. They're both essential. This idea of transparency is just so crucial. When people get the why, the how, and the what of an evaluation, it just demystifies the whole thing. It gets rid of the fear and builds the kind of trust that makes honest conversations even possible.
And that brings us to our final piece of the puzzle. We have to remember this isn't a one-and-done event. The best performance management systems are like living things. They create a continuous feedback loop that helps both the employee and the whole organization keep growing.
It's kind of funny when you think about it. The feedback system itself needs feedback to stay healthy. That means you have to regularly check in on the process, ask people what's working and what's not, and then, this is the important part, actually make changes based on what you learn. The system has to evolve, or it stops being effective. So, what happens if, despite all this, someone just isn't making progress? This is where HR's role is so important. They step in to act as the ultimate check and balance, making sure every single step has been fair, everything is documented, and that the focus has truly been on development before any kind of disciplinary action can even be considered. So I want to leave you with this one question to think about. Is the feedback in your world a period, something that just ends a conversation? Or is it a semicolon, a connector that links to the next thought? This framework is all about turning feedback into that semicolon, the real start of the next chapter in someone's growth.